Welcome to StopFake, the place where we debunk disinformation about Ukraine and set the record straight. I'm Euan MacDonald with this week's edition of Russian Disinformation Dissected. Among the fakes we examine this week, Crimea benefits economically from reunification with Russia, Ukraine drying up after having cut off water supplies to Crimea, and Kiev demands Google remove content on Maidan shootings from the internet. So let's get to the details. Prosperity came to Crimea with the arrival of Russian rule, declared the occupying Crimean authorities in a government report last week, buttressing their fake claims with figures and graphs. Fakes about economic growth and prosperity in Crimea are regularly peddled in the Russian media. Meanwhile, think tanks and centres who use real data in their analysis and the actual residents of Crimea paint a picture that is much less rosy than that portrayed in Russian propaganda. In presenting this fake claim of economic growth, Crimea's occupation authorities say that in 2012 and 2013, economic growth was close to zero, but that in 2015, the gross regional product grew by 8.5%, and in 2016 by 7%. Since Crimea was swallowed by Russia, it has seen significant improvement in virtually every sphere, from a rise in living standards to a fall in unemployment. So claims the Crimean Ministry of Economic Development. A lot has been written about the fact that the promised prosperity did not actually come to Crimea after the annexation. For example, the Ankara Centre for Crisis and Policy Studies, in its report on Crimea, notes that according to every economic indicator, Crimea is in decline. The centre analysed salary growth on the peninsula, where in 2013 the average monthly wage was about 11,000 Russian rubles. By 2016, it had risen to 25,000 rubles. But when considering the average exchange rate and inflation, this so-called growth is very misleading. Over the past 3 years, the average Crimean salary in dollars grew from $356 up to $362. That is by less than 2%. Two Ukrainian think tanks, the Black Sea Strategic Studies Institute and the Maidan of Foreign Affairs Foundation, recently published a report on the economic situation in Crimea. Crimea is currently under Western sanctions, resulting in a severe reduction of international flights to and from the peninsula, a reduction in local gas production, a significant decline in exports and imports, and the elimination of small and medium businesses. After 3 years of Russian occupation, Crimea is one of Russia's top 3 most subsidized regions, together with Chechnya and Ingushetia. 2/3 of Crimea's 2016 budget was subsidies from Russia's federal budget. The Ukrainian business publication, The World and Business, points to a growing unemployment in Crimea, which rose from 5% in 2013 to 7% in 2016. That promised prosperity never arrived in Crimea is something that the Western media also write about periodically. According to a Reuters story from last summer, more than 2 years after Russia annexed Crimea and promised its 2 million people a better life, residents say prices have soared, wages and pensions have stagnated, and tourists have fled. Ukraine's State Statistical Service notes that Crimean authorities often falsify data in order to prove to the world that Crimea is better off in Russia than it was in Ukraine, making statistics hostage to politics. The Russian site Ukraina.ru published a story last week claiming that Ukraine was in danger of a severe drought due to the closure of the North Crimean water canal. Ukraine will self-destruct and run out of fresh water because of its water blockade of Crimea, declared RIA Novosti and other Russian sites. On April 26th, Ukraine closed the sluices of the North Crimean Canal, halting water supplies to the annexed peninsula from its largest river, the Dnipro. According to the Ukrainian Hydrometeorological Center, a state agency whose hydrology department tracks water availability and water consumption, closing off the water flow to Crimea is not creating a problem for the Ukrainian mainland. On the contrary, and indeed obviously, Ukraine is left with more water. According to Radio Liberty, it is the Crimean Peninsula, annexed by Russia in 2014, that is suffering from water shortages. Its agricultural irrigation program has been severely impacted by the Ukrainian water cutoff. In 2014, Crimea had 140,000 hectares of irrigated agricultural land. Today, because of water shortages, Crimea is able to irrigate barely 13,000 hectares. Crimea receives 85% of its fresh water through the North Crimean Canal, which was built in the 1960s. The canal stretches from the Kakhovka Reservoir in southern Ukraine to Kerch in Crimea. After Russia annexed Crimea, Ukraine continued supplying fresh water to the peninsula free of charge. At the end of April of this year, Ukraine halted water supply to the occupied peninsula. Голос Правди, The Voice of Truth, is a Ukrainian publication that positions itself as being in opposition to the current Ukrainian government. On July 22nd, this Voice of Truth published a news story claiming that Ukrainian authorities had sent dozens of inquiries to search engine companies demanding that content about shootings that took place in Ukraine's Independence Square during the Maidan Revolution be removed from the web. Citing a Google transparency report on government requests to remove content, Голос Правди claims that all Ukrainian requests were about the shootings of protesters and police during the mass protests in the winter of 2013-2014. This fake was also reprinted by the site Polygraph. Ukraine indeed submitted a large number of requests for removing internet content in 2016, a total of 40 requests. But by comparison, during the same period, the Russian Federation issued 13,209 content removal requests to Google. The Moscow Times recently reported that Russia comes top of a ranking of numbers of government requests to have online content removed or blocked. Further, in Google's transparency report, we find mention of several copyright infringement notifications from the Ukrainian Ministry of Internal Affairs regarding user-made videos that spliced a Protect and Serve Ukrainian police commercial with cell phone footage of Ukrainian police abusing dissidents. Google did not remove this video from the internet. And nowhere in the transparency report is there any reference to removing footage of Maidan shootings. StopFake asks Ukraine's Interior Ministry to explain the Голос Правди claims about these purported requests to remove Maidan shooting video. The ministry said they had not made any such requests of Google, and there was no record of correspondence to that effect with the search engine company. Previously, Ukrainian internet site Censornet reported in February 12, 2014, that YouTube had removed a video showing the notorious Berkut Special Riot Police beating Maidan protesters. The video was removed because of excessive brutality. And nevertheless, there are still plenty of videos on the web from 2013 and 2014 showing Ukrainian riot police beating up protesters. That's it for this week. You can find much more dissected disinformation as well as useful tools for spotting fakes on the StopFake website. Be vigilant, look out for fakes, and if you spot any disinformation about Ukraine, send it to us for a truth autopsy. I'm Euan MacDonald, and this is StopFake. Thanks for watching.